Jill D is notoriously known as one of history's earliest serial killers. He was born in the year 1405 into a wealthy and powerful French family, eventually inheriting vast land and assets after the death of his parents. His upbringing was privileged, as he received a good education and went through military training. D achieved fame and respect as a soldier, notably serving as a commander alongside Joan of Arc in battles against the English during the 100 Years' War. For his achievements, he was even awarded the title of Marshal of France, one of the highest military honors. After Joan of Arc's execution in 1431, D's life took a dark and destructive turn. He retired from military service and began spending lots of money on different things in an attempt to make himself feel more joyful. This eventually led him to financial ruin, and his behavior only became more erratic and dangerous. During this time, he began engaging in occult practices, allegedly seeking power, wealth, and knowledge through dark rituals. His crimes involved the abduction, torture, and murder of children, primarily young boys from peasant families. Witnesses later testified that D brutally assaulted his victims, gaining sadistic pleasure from their pain before ultimately killing them. The exact number of his victims is unknown, but estimates suggest he may have murdered anywhere from dozens to hundreds of children. D's crimes went largely unnoticed due to his noble status, but suspicions grew as more children disappeared near his estates. In 1440, his reckless financial dealings led to a dispute with the church, prompting an investigation. After this investigation took place, the remains of multiple children were found, and authorities arrested him. He was tried for murder and sodomy, and despite his noble status, he was thankfully found guilty. Jill D was sentenced to death and executed by hanging and burning on October 26, 1440, ending his reign of terror. H. Holmes was born as Herman Webster Mudgett on May 16, 1861. He is considered one of America's first known serial killers. Raised in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Holmes had a troubled childhood as his father was strict, and he eventually developed a fascination with death early in his life. It is said that he would dissect animals as a child. He was intelligent and manipulative, traits he kept throughout the rest of his life. As a young adult, he attended medical school at the University of Michigan, where he gained knowledge that would later aid him in his future criminal activities. After moving to Chicago in the late 1880s, Holmes adopted a new alias and began a career in various schemes. His most infamous venture was the construction of a 3-story building, which became known as the Murder Castle. The building was designed with hidden rooms, secret passageways, soundproof chambers, and a disorienting layout, making it an ideal site for trapping and killing his victims. Holmes lured guests, particularly young women, to the hotel where he would torture and murder them, often using gas chambers or suffocation. He would then dispose of the bodies by dissecting them and selling their skeletons to medical schools. Holmes's criminal activities extended beyond the murder castle, as he also committed insurance fraud. During these schemes, he murdered multiple business partners and acquaintances for financial gain. He was ultimately captured after a failed insurance scheme involving his associate Benjamin Puttezel, whom Holmes had unfortunately killed. He was arrested in 1894, and the investigation revealed the extent of his murders. Holmes confessed to 27 killings, though the true number could be even higher. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Holmes was hanged on May 7, 1896, in Philadelphia, bringing an end to the life of one of America's most notorious serial killers. Albert Fish, born Hamilton, Albert Fish, born on May 19, 1870, was one of the most sadistic and infamous serial killers in American history. His early life was very rough, as he was placed in an orphanage at a young age due to his father's death and his mother's inability to care for him. At the orphanage, Fish experienced physical abuse, which he later claimed to have enjoyed, sparking his fascination with pain and violence. His family had a history of mental illness, which may have influenced these disturbing thoughts and later behavior. Fish eventually moved to New York City as a young adult, where he worked as a house painter. Here, he married and had 6 children, making everyone around him believe he was a normal person. However, that was far from the truth, as he began engaging in very disturbing acts. Fish was known to practice self-harm, inserting needles into his body and inflicting other forms of pain on himself. He also started abducting, torturing, and murdering children, with cannibalism being a particularly horrific aspect of his actions. One of his most notorious crimes was the murder of 10-year-old Grace Budd in 1928. Fish lured her away from her family, making her believe she was going to attend a party. Years later, he sent a gruesome letter to Grace's mother, describing in detail how he killed and cannibalized her daughter. This letter eventually led to Fish's capture, as the envelope contained a key clue that police traced back to him. Fish confessed to numerous crimes, claiming he had killed several children, though the exact number remains unknown. His confessions revealed how disturbing and twisted he truly was, explaining in detail his masochistic urges and religious delusions. He was diagnosed with severe psychosis, but was deemed sane enough to stand trial. Albert Fish was convicted of Grace Budd's murder and sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, he was executed by electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in New York, ending the life of one of America's most depraved killers. Jack the Ripper is the name given to an unidentified serial killer who terrorized the Whitechapel district of London in the 1880s. The Ripper's crimes were brutal and focused primarily on female sex workers, many of whom lived in the impoverished and overcrowded slums of eastern London. In the year 1888, between the months of August to November, he killed 5 women, and these killings were extremely violent. Jack the Ripper's signature killing method involved slashing the victims' throats and then performing gruesome abdominal mutilations, often removing organs such as the uterus or kidneys. This level of brutality led to widespread fear and hysteria in London, capturing the attention of both the public and the press. The media frenzy contributed to the killer's notoriety as the press coined the name Jack the Ripper, from a letter that was apparently sent by the murderer to the Central News Agency, though the authenticity of this letter remains disputed. The motivations behind the Ripper's crimes have been widely speculated upon, but remain unknown. Theories range from the killer being driven by sexual sadism, deep-seated misogyny, or possibly even a desire for notoriety. Some speculate that the killer had advanced knowledge of human anatomy, as his mutilations were very precise, suggesting that he might have been a surgeon or a butcher. Despite a massive investigation by Scotland Yard involving hundreds of interviews and numerous leads, Jack the Ripper was never caught. The lack of forensic technology and the chaotic nature of the investigation left many questions unanswered. Numerous suspects have been suggested over the years, but none have been definitively proven to be the Ripper. The case remains unsolved, making Jack the Ripper one of history's most infamous and elusive serial killers. Zodiac Killer, like Jack the Ripper, is another elusive serial killer, with their identity still not being known to this day. They are known for a series of brutal murders that took place in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s. The killer is officially linked to at least 5 murders, though he claimed to have killed 37 people in taunting letters sent to newspapers. The Zodiac's crimes began in December 1968 with the murder of 2 teenagers near Vallejo, California. Over the next several years, he would strike again, targeting young couples in secluded areas. His methods included shooting and stabbing victims, sometimes even attacking in broad daylight. The cryptic letters and ciphers he would send to local newspapers led to him gaining notoriety. In these letters, he would boast about his crimes and mock law enforcement's inability to catch him. The letters were filled with symbols, threats, and codes, with one famously containing a 408-character cipher that the Zodiac claimed would reveal his identity. Despite numerous attempts to crack his codes, the mystery surrounding him and his identity still continues. The Zodiac killer's motivations remain unclear, but he appeared to be driven by a desire for attention, power, and control. His use of media to communicate with the public and law enforcement was highly unusual and suggested that he enjoyed the fear and chaos he instigated. He displayed a calculated, almost theatrical cruelty that made him a figure of terror during his active years. Despite a massive investigation and numerous suspects over the years, he was unfortunately never caught. His last confirmed communication was in 1974, and no new credible leads have emerged since. The Zodiac killer remains a haunting figure in human history, with theories and investigations surrounding him and his crimes continuing to this day. Known as the Butcher of Rostov, Andrei Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in the Ukrainian SSR. His early life was not easy, as he grew up during the famine in the Soviet Union, which led to tales of cannibalism in his village. His father was captured during World War II, and Chikatilo himself faced bullying due to his shy nature and physical weakness. These early experiences likely influenced his later violent tendencies. As he got older, he worked various jobs, eventually becoming a teacher. However, his inability to maintain discipline in the classroom and his inappropriate behavior towards students led to his dismissal. He later worked as a factory clerk, and despite his troubled behavior, he married and fathered 2 children, maintaining a facade of being a normal citizen. Chikatilo's killing spree began in 1978 and lasted until 1990 as he targeted women and children, luring them to secluded areas where he would assault, mutilate, and murder them. His victims suffered horrific violence, including stabbing, dismemberment, and partial cannibalism. Chikatilo derived sexual gratification from the act of killing, which he later attributed to feeling powerless in other aspects of his life. He claimed that his crimes were driven by anger and sexual frustration. Despite being arrested multiple times during the investigation, Chikatilo evaded capture due to a lack of evidence and investigative errors. He was finally caught in November 1990 when undercover officers observed him approaching children at a train station. Forensic evidence, including blood and semen samples, linked him to several murders, and he eventually confessed to killing 56 people, though he was convicted of 52 murders in 1992. Later that year, he was sentenced to death, and on February 14, 1994, Andrei Chikatilo was executed by a single gunshot to the head. David Parker Ray, born on November 6, 1939, in Belen, New Mexico, had a very troubled childhood. He was raised by his grandfather, who gave him extreme punishments, and he was often exposed to violent pornography by his father, which allegedly influenced his sadistic tendencies. Ray struggled with feelings of inadequacy and developed disturbing sexual fantasies from an early age. As an adult, Ray worked as a mechanic for the New Mexico Parks Department, gaining a reputation as a skilled handyman. Behind this ordinary facade, however, he constructed a soundproof trailer, which he called his toy box. It was equipped with a gynecological chair, surgical tools, whips, chains, and other instruments for torture. Ray lured victims into his trailer, often with the help of accomplices, including his girlfriend Cindy Hendy. Once inside, the victims were drugged, restrained, and subjected to horrific torture and sexual assault, sometimes lasting for days. Ray would also record his sessions, playing tapes for the victims that detailed the torment they would later endure. His sadistic acts were driven by a desire for control and domination, and he meticulously planned his crimes to avoid detection. He is suspected of murdering multiple victims, though none of the bodies were ever found, making it difficult to determine the full extent of his crimes. He was eventually caught in 1999 when one of his victims, Cynthia Vigil, managed to escape from his trailer and alerted authorities. An investigation uncovered the chilling contents of the trailer, leading to Ray's arrest. He was convicted of numerous charges, including kidnapping and torture, and was sentenced to 224 years in prison. David Parker Ray died of a heart attack in 2002 while still incarcerated, leaving behind a legacy of horror and unanswered questions about the true number of his victims. John Wayne Gacy, often referred to as the Killer Clown, was responsible for the murders of at least 33 young men and boys. He was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, and had a troubled childhood. His alcoholic father was abusive, frequently belittling and physically assaulting Gacy. Despite these challenges, Gacy sought acceptance and respectability, joining community organizations and becoming a successful businessman. He was known for his involvement in local politics and his charitable work, often dressing as Pogo the Clown to entertain children at parties and events. Behind this seemingly friendly persona, Gacy hid a dark, predatory nature. He lured his victims, often young men from the Chicago area, by offering them jobs or promising money. Once inside his home, he would give them alcohol or drugs, then handcuff and sexually assault them. Many of his victims were strangled or suffocated, and Gacy buried 26 of the bodies in the crawl space beneath his house. For several years, his crimes went unnoticed due to his reputation as a respectable member of society. However, in December 1978, his last victim, 15-year-old Robert Peist, went missing after being seen with Gacy. This disappearance led to a police investigation, and a search warrant was eventually issued for Gacy's home. The horrifying discovery of human remains in the crawl space led to his arrest. During his 1980 trial, Gacy confessed to the murders, but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to death. Gacy spent 14 years on death row, where he would paint pictures of clowns before eventually being executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Dennis Rader, born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, became infamously known as the BTK Killer, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. Despite having a seemingly ordinary childhood, Rader exhibited disturbing behavior from an early age, including a fascination with bondage and a tendency to kill small animals. These early signs of psychopathy were masked by his otherwise normal life. As an adult, Rader held jobs as a compliance officer and a security alarm installer. He was also active in his church, even serving as its president at one point. He had a family and appeared to live a typical suburban lifestyle. However, between 1974 and 1991, Rader terrorized Wichita, Kansas, by committing heinous crimes involving binding, torturing, and murdering his victims. Over 17 years, he killed 10 people, including men, women, and children. His crimes were especially horrifying due to their premeditated nature and the cruelty with which he carried them out. Rader's motivation stemmed from sadistic fantasies and an intense need for power and control. He craved attention and would taunt law enforcement with letters and cryptic messages detailing his crimes. He loved the fear he instilled in the community and the fact that he was able to remain anonymous for so long, feeding his ego. In 2005, Rader was finally apprehended after resuming his taunting communications with police. He made a critical mistake by sending a floppy disk, which authorities traced back to his church computer. Rader was arrested, confessed to his crimes, and in 2005 was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms in prison without the possibility of parole. The BTK case remains one of the most notorious in American criminal history, showcasing the terrifying reality of a killer hiding in plain sight. Shipman, also known as Dr. Death, was a British general practitioner who is believed to be one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England, Shipman had a seemingly normal upbringing, though his mother's death from cancer when he was 17 profoundly affected him. During her illness, he observed how morphine eased her suffering, which may have influenced his later behavior. As an adult, Shipman became a well-respected doctor practicing in Hyde, Greater Manchester. However, between 1975 and 1998, he secretly murdered around 250 patients, predominantly elderly women, by administering lethal doses of heroin. Shipman exploited the trust his patients had in him, even visiting them at home under the guise of providing care, then injecting them with the fatal drug. As a doctor, he was seen as a caretaker, making his murders even more insidious. His victims, who trusted him to safeguard their lives, were instead killed in cold blood. He would also falsify medical records to cover up his actions and, in some cases, altered wills to benefit himself. His motivations remain largely unclear, but some experts speculate that his mother's death and his perceived control over life and death may have played a role in his killings. Others believe he was driven by a God complex, seeking power over his victims' fates. Shipman was eventually caught in 1998 after he forged the will of one of his victims, Kathleen Grundy, leading her daughter to suspect foul play. An investigation followed, uncovering the large number of murders he had committed. In the year 2000, he was convicted of 15 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Shipman hanged himself in his prison cell in 2004, escaping justice for the full extent of his monstrous crimes. Ted Bundy, born on November 24, 1946, was one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. He had a troubled childhood, growing up under the belief that his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. He later discovered the truth, which may have contributed to his growing sense of anger and confusion. Despite his disturbed inner life, Bundy became a seemingly successful young man, attending college and law school, and working on political campaigns. He used this facade of normality to build trust with his victims, often faking injuries or pretending to be a figure of authority to get closer to them. He would also use his good looks and intelligence to lure women to their deaths. Between the years 1974 and 1978, it is believed that Bundy murdered at least 30 young women, though the true number may be even higher. His crimes spanned across several states, including Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida, involving abduction, sexual assaults, and even necrophilia. His motivations were deeply rooted in a desire for control and power over his victims, driven by sadistic sexual fantasies. His murders were not just about killing, they involved horrific violence, and he would often return to the bodies of his victims to further desecrate them. Bundy's capture came after several close encounters with law enforcement. In 1975, he was arrested in Utah for a traffic violation, with police linking him to a series of missing women. After escaping custody twice, Bundy was finally apprehended in Florida in 1978. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. Bundy was executed in the electric chair in Florida on January 24, 1989. His case remains infamous due to his ability to manipulate those around him, hiding his monstrous nature behind a facade of charm and normality. Infamously known as the Son of Sam, David Berkowitz was an American serial killer who terrorized New York City during the mid-1970s. Born on June 1, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York, Berkowitz was adopted by a middle-class Jewish family. His childhood was marked by feelings of abandonment and anger. After learning of his adoption and the death of his adoptive mother, he became withdrawn and socially isolated, and by his teenage years, he exhibited troubling behavioral issues, including pyromania and animal cruelty. Between 1976 and 1977, he launched a killing spree that left 6 people dead and 7 others wounded. He would target young couples sitting in parked cars, primarily using a .44 caliber revolver to shoot his victims. Berkowitz's attacks created widespread fear throughout the city as they appeared random and senseless. He taunted police and the media with cryptic letters signed "The Son of Sam," claiming to be driven by a demonic force that spoke to him through his neighbor's dog. His motivations were rooted in delusional beliefs, and he claimed to be under the influence of satanic forces. His actions and bizarre letters sparked a media frenzy, and many in the city lived in fear during the height of his killing spree. Despite a massive manhunt, Berkowitz remained elusive until he received a parking ticket near one of the crime scenes, which ultimately led to his arrest in August 1977. He quickly confessed to the shootings, stating that a demon named Sam had commanded him to kill. He was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences. During his imprisonment, Berkowitz claimed to have found religion, renouncing his earlier beliefs and instead referring to himself as the Son of Hope. Despite his supposed transformation, Berkowitz remains in prison, where he continues to serve his life sentences without the possibility of parole. Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, was an American serial killer responsible for the brutal murders of 17 young men between 1978 and 1991. Born on May 21, 1960, in West Allis, Wisconsin, Dahmer's childhood overall wasn't too bad. He was a shy child who struggled with feelings of isolation and abandonment, particularly after his parents' divorce. He developed early signs of psychopathy, such as having an obsession with dead animals and dissecting them. Dahmer's murders were particularly shocking due to their sheer brutality. He would lure in his victims, mostly young men, many of whom were African American, back to his apartment, where he would drug them, kill them, and often perform acts of necrophilia. Dahmer dismembered his victims' bodies, sometimes even preserving parts as trophies. He also engaged in cannibalism and attempted to create zombies by drilling holes in the heads of some victims and injecting them with acid or boiling water in an effort to control them. Dahmer's motivation stemmed from being psychologically disturbed. He felt a deep need for control and a desire for dominance over his victims. His crimes escalated over time as he became increasingly detached from any sense of morality or empathy. Despite his horrific actions, Dahmer appeared to function relatively normally in society, holding various low-level jobs, although his life was plagued by alcoholism and loneliness. Dahmer was finally caught in July 1991 when one of his intended victims escaped and flagged down police. When officers entered his apartment, they discovered photographs of dismembered bodies and human remains, ultimately leading to his arrest. Dahmer confessed in detail to his crimes, shocking the entire nation. In 1992, he was convicted of 15 murders and sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate while serving his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution. In Wisconsin, Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker, was an American serial killer, rapist, and burglar who terrorized Southern California during the mid-1980s. Born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez had a troubled upbringing. He was exposed to violence at a young age, influenced by his cousin, a Vietnam War veteran who shared graphic stories of war atrocities. Ramirez also endured physical abuse at home and developed an early interest in Satanism and dark rituals. Between the years 1984 to 1985, he went on a brutal crime spree that left at least 14 people dead and many others injured. His crimes were marked by extreme violence and unpredictability, with his victims ranging from young children to elderly individuals with no particular pattern. He would break into homes at night, often sexually assaulting his victims before murdering them. He also incorporated satanic symbols and phrases into his killings, heightening the terror that he instilled in victims and the public. His crimes included shootings, stabbings, beatings, and mutilations, making him one of the most sadistic killers in American history. Ramirez's motivations appeared to be driven by a deep connection to evil and chaos. His interest in Satanism, as well as his brutal treatment of victims, seemed to be an expression of his dark, sadistic desires. He deeply enjoyed the fear he instilled in others, and his actions revealed a complete lack of empathy and remorse. Ramirez was caught in August 1985 after a citywide manhunt was triggered by his recognizable fingerprints found at a crime scene and a surviving victim's description. He was captured by a group of civilians in East Los Angeles after being recognized in public. In 1989, he was convicted of 13 murders, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death, but died in 2013 while on death row from complications related to cancer. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you learned something, make sure to leave a like and comment down below what types of videos you would like to see from me on this channel in the future, as I am interested in covering a large variety of topics. Anyways, thank you again, and goodbye.